Good afternoon and welcome to today's announcement. I'm Nathan Oley, the President and CEO of the International Economic Development Council, and we're really excited to be with all of you today. We're going to start today's conversation with an introduction from the IEDC Board Chair, Todd Green. Todd serves as the Institute Fellow and Executive Director for WorkRise at the Urban Institute, alongside serving as the IEDC Board Chair. Todd?
I know you join me in my excitement for the launch of an exciting new initiative that has the power to both amplify and accelerate economic development efforts in localities across our country. The important work of economic development creates and improves jobs, it supports large employers, and it improves the quality of life for individuals and families. Yet, this work is not easy. It requires technical skills, the ability to adjust to economic cycles, and is made even more challenging due to environmental factors brought on by climate change. And importantly, economic development progress requires a sustained focus anchored by partners who bring unique resources and skills to ensure that all stakeholders in our communities prosper. IEDC and its nearly 5,000 members have long partnered with the EDA, and we're just so excited to have this opportunity to work with a broader network of professional associations who bring specialized expertise. EDA's new Economic Recovery Corps will create a connected network addressing the resource gap between planning and implementation, boosting the capacity of communities to implement locally driven economic development strategies. The ERC will recruit and place more than 65 trained fellows in economic development organizations throughout the nation. They'll help organizations develop and execute regional economic development plans and projects in the communities they serve. And through a combination of strategic, operational, and funding support, the fellows will enhance the capacity of their host organizations and help improve economic development outcomes in their regions. I can't be more excited about the outcomes this program is poised to deliver. Over the course of this session, you'll learn more about the details of this program, including the next steps. So finally, I know that I speak for everyone. We are incredibly grateful for the leadership and innovation from EDA and from EDA's leadership in making this program possible. So I'll turn it back to you, Nathan, who's the president and CEO of IEDC, to continue with today's program. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Todd. We really appreciate that introduction and really thrilled to have with us today the man behind this program and the reason that this program was even an opportunity for us and all of our partners. Craig Bristati, as the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Economic Development at the U.S. Economic Development Administration. He's someone that I've known for a long time, is a great friend, great advocate for economic development and economic developers. And Craig, thank you for being with us today, and thank you for the commitment EDA is showing through this program.
Nathan, you're too kind, sir. I would like to tweak the language that you just provided and just share that the people behind this program are genuinely the entire economic development community. I think all of us are still catching our breaths a bit after this unprecedented historic pandemic. And as we do that, I know so many of us are reflecting on the importance of teamwork in economic development, whether it's locally, regionally, or in this case, nationally. I do believe that teamwork makes the dream work. And EDA for decades now has embraced the value and the priority of a coalition-based approach across place-based economic development. One can go fast by going alone, but to go far, you got to go together. And that's bringing industry, bringing academia, nonprofits, and citizens together. And what I'm setting up now is I hope everyone, as we dive into today's conversation, we keep collaboration and that network potential top of mind, but not just for this project or this program and the Economic Recovery Corps, really as we think holistically about the entire industry at this moment. Over the last 2 years, EDA has designed, launched, and with the help of the industry, invested in an incredible portfolio of transformational collaborative projects. I think at the forefront of that is our most recent, very popular Build Back Better Regional Challenge, where we invested $1 billion in transformational, regionally based economic development. And that same sentiment was reflected in our Good Jobs Challenge, building regional workforce systems, really scaling up, leveling up our game in the economic development industry to respond to the needs of today's economy. And those themes were embedded across the portfolio. Because I'd also like to pause and highlight the $1 million planning grants that we made to states. So for the first time in EDA's history, we invested directly in our states to design, execute modern economic development plans for the recovery. And across this array of programming and strategies, I like to speak to it as a new national economic development infrastructure. The regional planning, the collaboration, state planning, the connectivity across our districts, our development organizations, nonprofits, and so much more, give us a foundation to truly accelerate our work. And this infusion of talent and coordination in the economic recovery core now gives us an added ingredient to truly accelerate our connectivity and collaboration to build a more inclusive economy. So once again, folks, as we dive into today's conversation and we begin to ideate and implement this work, I challenge all of us that are champions, participants, or benefactors of this work to think about its holistic fit in the broader systems that we're starting and scaling in the economic development infrastructure of today. Thanks so much for the creativity and the collaboration. Once again, teamwork makes the dream work. Excited to get to work here, team. Thank you.
Craig, thank you very much. I really appreciate not just those remarks and sentiments, but obviously the work of your entire team in making this happen. So thank you for being with us. Thank you for the leadership EDA has shown through you and your team, and looking forward to making this work. So now I want to pivot. We've got another great guest here from the US EDA, the Assistant Secretary for Economic Development for the U.S. Economic Development Administration, Alejandro Castillo. Alejandro, thank you for being with us. Thank you for the support of not just this work, but the economic development field throughout your career. Thanks for being with us today.
Delighted to be with you, Nathan. And these are exciting times. These are exciting times. The communities need it. The profession needs it. And I'm just happy that you had a chance to talk to Craig, who in many ways was the mastermind of this effort. And it's a testament to how innovative and flexible EDA is to solving problems. So I'm excited just to be with you all.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things Craig mentioned, I think is really critical to this is around partnerships. EDA has long supported locally driven economic development strategies and encouraged partnerships between regional stakeholders to plan and advance their strategies. Why is this moment in particular such an important time to invest in the organizational capacity of organizations that are leading economic development initiatives in their own communities and regions?
So that's a great question. Let's take a step back. One of the key initiatives or efforts, I should say, that EDA has undertaken in the last year was deploying $3 billion under the American Rescue Plan. As you know, and I'm sure folks who are on this webinar understand, the American Rescue Plan was a response, one of the first pieces of legislation that President Biden signed into law. And it was really to focus on the pandemic, but also to invest post-pandemic and really put us in a position to build communities across the country. What we noticed, Nathan, and you were also key to this, as well as Joe McKinney at NATO and others, and was that not only did we want to deploy this amount of resources in a very thoughtful, in a very methodical way, but also anchored around equity and anchor around inclusion, as well as engaging communities that traditionally have not been able to access these resources because of capacity. And we turned the script basically on its head, and we said, look, Washington doesn't know what communities really need, particularly at this juncture. And by asking the question, and in many ways, 2 of the 6 grants that we put out were challenges. We asked communities to tell us what they needed, how they envisioned their own economic development. And the secret sauce of all of this was really anchored around coalitions, the partnerships that you have well stated. And it's that model that I think is catching on across government, which is bringing people together, asking them what the response to their economic challenges are, and asking them what their assets to their economic opportunities are, and letting them drive it. So these coalitions are really the secret sauce, so to speak. And I think not only at the local level, at the state level, but also at the federal level. And that's why partnering with you, NATO, NACO, and so many other organizations is key.
Wonderful. We talked about equity, and obviously that is one of the pillars for EDA's investment criteria. How does this award in particular play a role in directly addressing those priorities?
Sure. So equity, just to again provide some context, we revisited EDA's investment priorities, and we made equity at the top of that 7 investment priorities. So I hope people will take a look at what those investment priorities are. But I will tell you equity, because what we also saw during the pandemic were how underserved communities fared terribly. With this pandemic, we saw communities of color across the country didn't have that access to opportunities and economic development, as well as we saw communities that had been disinvested for decades. So we took a lens to look at underserved communities. We took a lens to look at rural communities and coal communities and indigenous communities. So when we talk about equity, Nathan, we're talking about equity from a very broad lens, but also trying to be as intentional as possible, because the role of EDA, as you know, is really working in distressed communities. And our goal is, as we continue to make these critical investments, whether it's through ARPA or through the infrastructure law or CHIPS and Science Act or the Inflation Reduction Act, that these federal dollars are actually reaching communities in a fair and equitable way, so that we can all grow communities across the country.
Absolutely. So part of what we put into this proposal, and certainly the vision behind this program itself, is bringing a collaborative focus to enhance the quality and coordination of local and regional work. And a piece of that in particular is focused on Native American and tribal populations. Can you talk a little bit about EDA's priorities in addressing the needs of Native American and tribal and indigenous populations, both on and off tribal lands, and how it relates to your larger priorities?
Yes, and that's a question that brings a lot of great experiences, both for me in this position and in other positions that I've held. But let me talk specifically about the American Rescue Plan. Once again, we made a $100 million commitment to indigenous communities across the spectrum. And it was really fascinating to watch. At the end of it all, we actually devoted over $400 million to projects that will impact indigenous communities. It was fascinating to watch also, Nathan, indigenous communities responding not just to that specific bucket of $100 million, but across the 6 different grants that we put together. I will tell you very distinctly, one of the Build Back Better Regional Challenge, as you may know, was a $1 billion challenge. We received 529 applications, of which we were able to dwindle it down to 60 finalists. Among those 60 finalists were several indigenous communities, and I visited one in particular, which was Hopi Tribe, which is located, it's part of the Navajo Indian community, but more importantly, it's outside of Flagstaff, Arizona, and it was fantastic to watch how their proposal really incorporated technology and innovation in ways that continue to support their tribal values, as well as advance the opportunities for that area. And I give you that as an example, Nathan, as a way to showcase that it wasn't just layered specifically to that $100 million, but that we actually engage them in every facet. Our hope through this effort is to continue to build capacity, to continue to build professionals in the economic space, because what we want is to make sure that economic development practitioners are also diverse and inclusive. So that's the promise of this effort, and I'm excited about it because I really see it coming to fruition thanks to the work that you and others will be doing.
Well, we're very excited to move that work forward. And obviously collaboration is a huge part of this. Both, you heard Craig talk about it in the front end, but obviously the collaboration that we built with all of our partners for this project is going to be instrumental in making this happen. But there's also a collaboration piece to this for the fellows. So obviously they're going to have a chance to be embedded directly in communities and regions across the country to help, really drive inclusive economic development initiatives, but they're also going to be connected to one another through this fellowship program. How do you see that aspect of the program supporting EDA's mission and vision for resilient, innovative regional economies that strengthen U.S. global competitiveness for years to come?
I will tell you, and I'm going to draw from just my personal experience. I was a fellow in other very early on in my career, and what I took away from it was the relationship, the exchange of ideas. Our hope, and again, I'm just using it from my personal vantage point, I know the power of fellowship, especially when you're in a sector or a profession like economic development. It's the exchange of experiences, the exchange of observation, the exchange of possibilities. Our goal is that this cohort of fellows will continue to stay together and be together as they move through their profession. But more importantly, that they're going to be that element that's going to bridge the many generations of practitioners that exist in the economic development space, and hopefully, pass on that baton, but more importantly, bring the new vision, a new idea, how to leverage technology innovation to further economic development. And it's part of the philosophy of EDA. Just like we have fellows, we also have communities of practice, which you are also participating in. This all is part of the bigger tent philosophically of what EDA believes at its core, and that is the partnership, the fellowship, the communities of practice, the sharing of knowledge and information. And again, that's the excitement of this all, that we're actually doing very tangible practices in this field.
Thank you. Finally, one of the other aspects of this program is the ability for these fellows to connect communities with federal resources. And obviously EDA is one huge component of that, but also there's a number of other, in the federal family that will be really opportunistic for these communities to both understand how they might access and what those funds are like, but also, what opportunities might exist in the future. Can you talk a little bit about EDA's role as the economic development integrator and how that ties into a program like this?
Sure. So that is the operative term, integrator. And as you well know from your previous service at EDA, our goal is to connect. So we are connecting with the Department of Energy. We are connecting with the Department of Transportation, Department of Labor, as you well pointed out, that federal family. But let me draw back to the four major pieces of legislation that I mentioned at the beginning. The American Rescue Plan, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the CHIPS and Science Act, and the Inflation Reduction Act. All of those pieces of legislation and now law have funding tied to it, have specific projects tied to it as well. Our goal for these fellows is to learn how to navigate the federal government. And again, it's not for the faint of heart, but it's for those individuals that are really determined. Because once you understand how to best navigate the federal government, then you can connect the dots. And again, the term integrator is, in my view, connecting the dot and bringing people at the table. You know that we worked very well with Xochitl Torres Small over at USDA. How will these fellows also help bring closer that federal family, and also have ideas that we may change the paradigms of how we do things? I'm reminded by Tony Pippa's work over at Brookings of the multitude of agencies that come into play in rural America. How can we better streamline? And my goal is, or our goal, I should say, is that these fellows will help us streamline, will help us create new paradigms on how we do this work that has greater impact overall and a better return on investment for taxpayers across the country as well.
Absolutely. So I'm going to ask one last question of you, and thank you for spending so much time with us. And that is, as you think about this program and over the next 4 years of implementation of this program, what in your eyes is the single biggest opportunity that this program might provide to communities or to the economic development field?
So much. Where do I begin? First of all, this type of program is what we need to make sure that at the ground level, which is where the action really is, that we can build capacity, that we can bring the economic development growth of opportunities to organizations. But more importantly, I think committed to the profession as a whole, have really economic development practitioners and professionals who are holistic in their views, as we always are, but that have better tools. Usually this is not a space where we've dedicated resources. So our goal is to not just dedicate this resource, this $30 million, but hopefully, and I will leave that up to you and others, hopefully convince some of our decision makers that this is the way to go, that we need to not just invest in the programs, but also invest in the capacity and invest in the people who are going to be doing this job.
Well, thank you very much, Assistant Secretary Castillo, for being with us. Thank you for the commitment to programs like this. Thank you to the work your team has done already and will continue to do in partnership with us on this program. Thank you for spending time with us.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nathan. Appreciate it.
Of course. Well, now I'm going to pivot a little bit. One of the most special pieces of this program is the partnerships that the IEDC has been able to build with some really great organizations and partners. And so I'm going to introduce and ask them to join me today. We've got Matt Chase from the National Association of Counties, Joe McKinney from the National Association of Development Organizations, Jen Steinfeld from the National League of Cities, Tad McGalliard from the International City and County Management Association, Matt Dunn from the Center on Rural Innovation, and Robert Killen from the Regional Accelerator and Innovation Network. Thank you all for being with us today, but more importantly, thank you for your partnership in this program and the opportunity to work alongside all of you in making this happen. Maybe I'll start, Matt, I see you in my top left corner of my screen, so I'm going to start with you. First, if you could just do a very quick introduction of what NACO is and what you do, but also why was this program an opportunity that you wanted to be engaged in?
Great. Thank you, Nathan. And thank you for the opportunity to join you and partner. So the National Association of Counties represents the 3,069 county governments, parishes, and boroughs. And counties invest about $600 billion a year in our communities, of which a good portion is related to community and economic development. On the community development side, a lot of the assets that we perceive for quality of life, whether it's libraries and parks and hospitals and other things like that. And on the economic development side, we have a strong interest in building a resilient proof economy. So we're really excited to build this group of fellows to help us. We have about half of our counties across the country that are growing, and we have about half that are stagnant or declining. And even within the counties that are growing, you have great disparities. So how can we have a more inclusive economy? And we believe disparities are really expensive, particularly for the county social safety net and other public service programs. That poverty is expensive, and we would much rather give people an opportunity to prosper. And we just think morally that's the right thing to do. So thank you for your leadership.
Thanks so much, Matt. Tad, I've got you on my screen next. I'm going to come to you. Talk a little bit about what ICMA is and obviously, why this was an opportunity that you guys wanted to be a part of.
No, absolutely. Thanks, Nathan. I'm Tad McGuire from ICMA. ICMA is the International City County Management Association. We're the professional home for the chief administrative officials, those appointed city and county managers that work for elected officials that Matt and the National Association of Counties and the National League of Cities whose elected officials work there. ICMA as a professional association has always valued economic development as one of the core responsibilities of what our members do. When you look at any survey that we've done over the last 40 years, when we've asked what are the priorities for city and county managers, almost always will point to the fact that economic opportunity and job growth are essential KPIs that city managers and county managers will be judged by. Economic development is one of their core responsibilities. For us, like what Matt said too, and what the Assistant Secretary talked about, capacity building in local governments, particularly those that are distressed. And so any program that can provide support to the economic development function, whether that's in an economic development district or a local government proper, or some sort of quasi governmental agency, I think is going to be looked upon very favorably and very highly regarded by folks in the profession of city and county management. So all of that attracted us to being a part of this coalition, and we're very happy to be a part of it, Nathan.
Thank you so much, Dad. Robert, I'm going to come to you next. And obviously, RAIN is a slightly different organization and more regional focused than some of these other partners. Talk to us a little bit about what RAIN is, what you do, and obviously why you want to be a part of this.
Thank you, Nathan. We are proud to be a part of this work. As you are correct, RAIN is actually an organization formed in Oregon about 8 years ago. And our charter was to build out inclusive entrepreneurial ecosystems in rural Oregon. And we started with a high focus on high growth traded sector and pivoted to really have to support our rural communities where they're at, which is largely the main street businesses. We still have that entrepreneurial DNA, but we've created a very unique model, which is why we're proud to be a part of this, excited to be a part of this, because we've had great success generating entrepreneurial activity and finding a way to connect businesses, pre-existing businesses, with the supports that they need in two parts. We listen first, and I know every organization says they listen first. We listen first and act on the listening, right? We distill what we hear and turn that into action and then do the work. So we have boots on the ground, and we have capacity issues. We're now serving in Oregon and Washington. The ability to take our model and replicate it so that other communities can benefit from what we've discovered and are getting success with is really exciting.
Thank you so much, Robert. We're really excited, especially the training component that you guys are going to bring to this project. Jen, I'm going to pivot to you now in the National League of Cities. Again, quick highlight of what the National League of Cities does, and obviously another piece to this of why you wanted to be a part of this project.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really thrilled to be a part of this project and with all of these partners. The National League of Cities is the voice of America's cities, towns, and villages. We represent local government, and we have about 2,700 members that are direct dues-paying members to us. We also represent the 19,500 incorporated places in the United States. And I know that when people hear cities, they think about large cities. But I also know that over the last couple of years, working with all the programs that Secretary Castillo talked about, ARPA, the bipartisan infrastructure law, we've seen how many of these small communities just are not prepared to take advantage of these opportunities. So we've been working quite a bit with the bipartisan infrastructure law to build out an infrastructure hub with a number of partners to help more rural communities and smaller communities become competitive applicants for many of these competitive dollars. We've been working with our members to be prepared to both receive and then report on the ARPA dollars that came to them directly. But I don't think most people understand that 76% of the incorporated places across the US have fewer than 5,000 people. So when we're talking about cities and we're talking about rural communities, it's not an either or, it's often both. And so that's why we're really excited about this, in addition to, of course, the racial equity component, which is something that we've invested quite a bit in. And it's why I got into economic development work, is to be able to talk about inclusion and equity and making more opportunity available for all. So that's why we're so thrilled to be a part of this partnership.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you again, Jen. We really appreciate the commitment to this work and the longstanding work that you guys have been doing in this space. Matt Dunn, I'm going to come to you next. Center on Rural Innovation with obviously a very rural focus, but talk a little bit about what you guys have been working on and how you came to be focused on this kind of work.
You bet. Nathan, thank you so much for including us, and I'm honored to be included with this incredible group of partners representing different pieces of the U.S. economy. The Center on Rural Innovation is dedicated to building tech economies in small town America. We know that with automation and with the importance of entrepreneurship in creating a vibrant and resilient economy for the future, that doesn't mean that rural economies need to be all tech, but a piece of it can be and should be in order to create that resilience, those high-paying jobs, and that wealth creation potential. So we work with communities all across the country. We're currently in 30 states doing work with smaller micropolitan areas to leverage their assets where they are and to help them create those jobs and companies of the future. And as we've been doing this, and Robert certainly spoke to this, the importance of capacity in rural places is paramount. Not even half of all rural counties have gotten back to their pre-2008 recession level. And they've been trying to make it work with fewer and fewer resources. So a program like this really opens the door to that extra capacity. And we're just so excited about what these kinds of individuals can bring with their energy, with the expertise that we'll all collectively be bringing to them in order to be able to unlock that incredible potential in rural America.
Thank you so much, Matt. And finally, certainly not last but not least, Joe McKinney from the National Association of Development Organizations. Joe, can you describe a little bit about what NATO does and why you're excited to be a part of this?
Sure. Thanks, Nathan. Really quickly, we represent the 500 regional development organizations across the country. They go by a lot of different names, whether that's council of governments, regional councils, development districts. But I think the main umbrella is that they're all involved in regional community economic development. Just a couple of quick things to add. One is the collaboration and partnership here. Nathan, Alejandra, Craig, they've all mentioned that it's almost a natural partnership. The folks in this particular project, we work together on a number of things. I think one thing that the pandemic brought together was that we needed more partners than ourselves. And so really in any opportunity we have now, we sit down, one of the first things is like, who needs to be involved? Certainly cities, counties, economic development organizations, rural, urban. So this is, I think, an outgrowth of that partnership that's been built. The other thing I would say is just EDA's involvement in this. All of us in the economic development community know that the event that might cause some economic shock, that may have a finite period, but the recovery kind of never ends. And so this is, to me, a perfect project to be involved with, because EDA's role in a lot of these cases is making sure that these economies recover once the event has ended. And so working with this group and then also working with fellows, we certainly have worked with fellows here at our organization. I think all of the partners have, and many of those that are on the webinar. To me, that's some of the best money that we have is just brilliant minds, commitment to excellence. And so, it again, naturally, it's not something that happened overnight. This happened with discussions from all these partners with EDA, and we just are fortunate to be a part of that group. So thanks.
Well, Joe, you walked right into my next question. So thank you for framing that up so well. And I want to open it up to anyone who wants to respond. And that is right around collaboration. To me, the fundamental foundations of economic development, especially when we're driving more equitable economic outcomes, center around collaboration as opposed to competition. And that is not just an economic development practice, it's also organizations like these that are working together to try and make these outcomes better. Why in your own organizations is collaboration important, and how do you build that into your culture?
So I'll start since I teed that question up. So as far as our organization, we're a fairly small organization in DC. And I think we quickly realized, particularly during the pandemic, but before that, is that we can't go it alone. And so we rely a lot on the National Association of Counties, with the League of Cities, and with IADC and others to fill certain roles that we can't we don't have the resources, the capacity. And so building that partnership has expanded, I think, NATO's impact nationally and regionally is having those partners on board who have been in existence for a long time, who know the issues that we deal with. Certainly NACO has expertise in areas we don't, but the fact that we're all kind of one entity with one interest to me is I think lifts all of us up, and this is an opportunity here to do that again.
Thanks so much. Jen, I saw you had raised your hand to me. You wanna go next?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't know if folks know this, but we're actually physically co-located with NACO. We share a floor and some conference space with them. So we also are quite active collaborators with a lot of the partners on this grant. And part of the reason that we need to do that is because, as you mentioned, like the work that's happening is happening at multiple levels of government. It's happening across regions, and we all need to be able to move beyond our individual areas of expertise to do that. And to be able to serve our communities well. We need to be involving counties. We need to be engaged with states. We need to be looking at, everyone likes to talk about the rural urban divide, but we need to look at the rural urban overlap and all of the ways that, living in this new, much more virtual world expands the possibility and potential for people to be co-located in multiple places, for moving away from urban sprawl into rural engagement and rural development. And we all have our areas of expertise here. I know, I focus on entrepreneurship and small business development and having cities adopt policies that really invest in their local leaders and diverse business owners within their local community. But I know as an organization, we also really excel at translational research, not doing the original research, but taking that research and making it accessible for elected city leaders who have another day job, who have their families and their kids and all of these things, and really distilling that down to, here are 10 actionable steps that you can take in your community as a city council person in, again, often a small or a fairly rural incorporated area. That's our membership, and they need that support and help, and we need the partnership to have the information to be able to distill and get out to them. So I think it's really a part of our lifeblood. We're coming up on our 100th anniversary in 2024, and we wouldn't be here for 100 years, and we wouldn't be here for 100 more if we weren't able to collaborate with great partners like all of these.
Thank you so much, Jen. Matt Chase, I saw you coming off mute there. You want to go next?
Sure. Just to build on to what Jen was saying, and I think she laid it out quite nicely, was modern day economic development is so complex. 30 years ago, when I got into the business, it was water and sewer lines into a business park. And what we're talking about, at least with county elected officials, is they're policymakers, they're investors, they're basically investment bankers investing billions of dollars a year across the country into economic development and making sure they have metrics for those investments. They're conveners. They're also owners of major assets, whether it's airports, ports, hospitals, schools, community colleges, et cetera. And it really requires collaboration. That modern day economic development, as all the practitioners know better than I do, it's really the intersection of workforce policy, housing, transportation, broadband, quality of life assets. And from a county perspective, we tend to be reliant on property taxes, for example. So the transition in the energy economy is really important to us. As we put out things like coal power plants, those are typically the largest property taxpayers in a county. So you're decimating K through 12 school, you're decimating your county government. We think it may be appropriate to do that, but how do you transition? What do you do with your tax base? What do you do with your workforce? I think with COVID and the demographic changes that we're seeing across the country and the mobility of the modern day workforce, what's happening to commercial real estate values has a huge impact on county budgets and the energy in these communities, not the power energy, but the social energy and the collaboration. And so what we want to do is really think through the speed of the changes in the modern day economy. How can policymakers keep up with it? How can they future-proof their economies? And those that have been left behind in recent decades, how do they catch up when the wealthier communities are really accelerating with their growth? And so it's a really complicated world. And the more capacity building and the more thinking we can bring to the table, the better.
Thanks so much, Matt. Anyone else have any thoughts they want to share, Robert?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I really appreciate what Matt just said about the energy in communities. If we think about entrepreneurial activity, small business activity at the ground level, most of those individuals, those business owners, if they're facing a challenge, they feel like they're in a rowboat in the middle of the ocean without a compass. They don't know where to point, they don't know where to go. And we all know, being in this space, that there's almost no challenge that they're facing that doesn't have one or more organizations that exist to help them through it. Their lack of knowledge of that is not their fault. It's our fault, because we haven't done a good enough job of collaborating, of coming together, understanding who's doing what and how we can refer back and forth. It only takes a few key organizations that are actually working in those communities to understand the entire ecosystem of support services to change the face of a community, so that the communities, that the business owner knowledge or understanding is that when they have a problem, they're confident there's going to be somebody that can help them. Our collaboration here and across the spectrum of business supports can change. We can change that narrative by greater collaboration. And it's a part of what we do. We just completed a EDA sprint grant where we had 75 different organizations pulled in over the course of that grant, supporting businesses across the state of Oregon. So it's in our DNA, and I hope to continue it here.
Thanks so much, Robert. Matt?
You know, Nathan, I echoing the sentiments that were there, but if you're working in rural places, you know you've got to collaborate, right? There's just, otherwise you're not going to get anything done. Everyone's got to come to the table to make a difference. And we've tried to stay very disciplined on the work that we do in the tradable tech economy to make sure that that's a piece of the economy. But the folks that we're working with are trying to do all the things. And so the value of getting all of the expertise here, when my team says, can we please find someone who can come in and work with the Main Street businesses so they have a vibrant downtown, or can we please have folks who are helping us with new agritourism efforts? That's going to be super powerful to be able to bring a collective together through these individuals who will become extraordinary expertise in a variety of ways, and I think will challenge us. Right? We'll be asking us the tough questions about our model, how it works, and will teach us how they can work more closely together. We're also at a unique moment in time. Not only COVID, but the bipartisan infrastructure bill has given us a chance to have broadband to every community in the United States of America. And it's on all of us to then say, so what? How do we turn that unprecedented rural electrification-like investment into resilient jobs of the future? And that's what this collaboration can really bring at this unique moment in time.
Thank you so much, Matt. Ted, I saw you came off mute as well.
Yeah, no, I agree with just about everything that's been said here. I think one of the things for us that's really powerful about this partnership is, quite honestly, not every community is going to get a fellow, but there's going to be dozens, if not hundreds of lessons learned that need to be shared throughout these networks. And so this network that you pulled together for this project basically can reach into local government, whether it's elected or appointed officials, economic development professionals, a whole bunch of other partners of local governments and economic development activities. And so that to me is the really impressive thing about this coalition, is that not only are we going to help directly, several dozen communities, but we have the potential to really increase the capacity through our education and learning and peer-to-peer engagement and outreach activities over the next 4 years.
Thank you so much. Well, I want to wrap up the conversation with one final question, and that is on the premise that a program like this has the opportunity to be transformational because it is directly investing in communities that have been left behind in the past. But quite frankly, it would have been really beneficial to have a program like this 10 years ago to prepare communities for the transformational opportunity we have now. So as you all think about your own communities, your own networks, your own membership, how does a program like this help to drive more equitable economic outcomes in the communities that you're serving?
Nathan, one of my favorite sayings is the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the second best time is today. So that's how I think about this. Yes, it would have been great 10 years ago to have these things, or 20 or 30 or 50. And we didn't know then what we know now. And we didn't have the breadth of viewpoints that we have now. at the table, really driving these decisions. And so I think, we just have an opportunity to harness it in the moment that we're in. And yeah, I wish we weren't so far down the line on climate change, for instance, as has been brought up already. But we also have an opportunity in the moment that we're in, where we're all thinking more collaboratively minded, where we have technology that enables, I don't live in DC, I live in Providence, Rhode Island. I'm closer to Matt than I am to a lot of my colleagues here. And so that makes it possible for us to bring together a group like the 200 plus people that are here in this webinar today. And we can work together, we can collaborate, we can share information and share knowledge and learning. We can bring people together for learning cohorts and learning circles in ways that we couldn't without this tech-enabled world. So I think it's a really great time to be doing the work, and I'm really excited about the potential and possibility.
Thanks so much, Jim.
Yeah, so I'll hop in just real quick. I think the good thing about this and the fact that it is long overdue is that it's not just a one-off. I think the fact that EDA has diversity and inclusion in their core mission, in their investment priorities, I think strengthens this. It's not just a one-off. I think it's one tool in our toolkit to address that. And all of us in the organizations are involved in a lot of different ways to promote that. To me, it's just another tool, another resource that supports what we all know is needed. So,
Thanks, Joe. Others?
Nathan, I would just add that it's a perfect moment to embrace equity where you have a labor shortage, you've got technology, there's an opportunity to empower people and give them an opportunity. We need to match up skills with opportunity. We need to match up location with opportunity. But those communities that have a strategic vision and are truly authentic about their collaboration, you're seeing them take advantage of the modern world. How can we help instill that leadership and build that capacity in more places? It's really hard to be creative sometimes when you're dealing with crisis and you're losing economic opportunity and manufacturing plants are closing, et cetera. But we've seen those communities that come together, public, private, nonprofit together, and are really intentional, they can do it. And so with EDA and IDC bringing that capacity, we're more optimistic.
Thanks so much, Matt.
I'll just say that in addition to systemic issues that impact equity and inclusion, there's also an issue of trust, especially in rural communities. If you have demographics that have not been included, it's hard to just say, okay, we're now including you and expect them to show up. In order to make that happen, we have to exhibit through our work that we are reaching out, that we are actively seeking out the participation of demographics that have not been around. And it takes time. We have to actually prove ourselves by doing work on the ground. So we're going to be training the fellows in this work, and our expectation is that the fellows will exhibit and embody a welcoming, inclusive activity. And by doing that over time, build trust within those demographic communities that have historically been underserved.
Thanks, Robert. Matt or Tad, anything you want to add?
Robert said it about rural America head on. There is inclusivity in terms of who's included in the economy, whether that's on a geographic basis in the rural places that have been left behind in the transition, or just the fact that, rural America is not white America. And if we're going to be serious about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we cannot leave out BIPOC communities in rural places. But that doesn't happen just because we say it's going to. It takes really intentional work. It takes learning from trying in various ways. And the commitment of all the folks and the organizations here, I think, is super exciting in solving for that really, really gnarly problem that we're committed to making better.
Absolutely. Thanks, Matt.
And I'll just echo what everybody has said. I mean, I think this is a really remarkable program for equity. And this administration has done a lot of great things, bringing equity to the forefront of a lot of federal programming. ICMA, like other organizations, has been on a re-energized, I should say, equity journey over the last few years. And some of the more recent conversations that we've been having is about how do we take our equity conversations that we've been having with an equity cohort and some work we've done through the Brownfields Conference and other sorts of investments like that, to start turning those and reframing some of those conversations more around equitable development. So I think this project's going to be a major part of a lot of those conversations over the next few years as we all begin to do lots of great things with equity.
Well, thank you all very much for being with us today, for sharing a little bit more about your organizations and obviously the partnership that exists to make this work. We're really excited to be working alongside all of you and everyone that is on the webinar today. This is really just a kickoff call, an opportunity to talk about this program. We're going to be building it out collaboratively over the coming months. I saw a number of questions come in around the timing for this and fellows and organizations. The plan is that this spring to be opening up an application period for host organizations, and that will be organizations from across the spectrum, from these partners, from economic development organizations. We want to make sure that we are as wide as and inclusive as possible in getting organizations in that would have an interest in hosting a fellow. The beauty of this program is that this program will fully fund those fellows for 3 years once they're embedded in those organizations. The commitment for organizations is simply to be engaged, to have the right support structure, to manage these fellows, to give them the flexibility to be engaged with these partners as we provide training and opportunities, and certainly the networking opportunities, but also to make sure that you've got a commitment to getting them engaged with your wider region, to making sure that you're hosting conversations, that they're showing up at conversations, and being a really deep and embedded part of the community through this project. They are 3-year fellowships. There will be at least 65 fellows that are placed in organizations. We'll start with the process in the spring to select host communities, and all of these partners and even more. We'll be sending a ton of information out about that. We will then follow that with the fellows as well to gain a cohort of folks that are interested in serving as fellows for up to 3 years. And so we hope that all of you will be partners with us in both getting the word out, thinking about organizations that would be good to host these fellows, as well as fellows, early to mid-career folks that have the opportunity not only to build their own economic development experience, but also get some true community and economic development engagement through this process. So there's a lot more information to come. We want you all to be engaged in this process. If you are not already on the distribution lists of all of these partners, you should be. They're going to be sending a ton of information out alongside the IEDC and the EDA. But I want to thank all of our partners. I want to thank EDA for the partnership in making this happen, and appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.